It is the story of a man named Bernardo Salinas, who spent his nights sleeping in the back seat of his battered, rusted taxi, because he literally had nowhere else to go. He was not an uneducated man, nor was he someone who had refused to put in the hard work. In fact, Bernardo had toiled for years with the same grueling, back-breaking intensity as anyone else in his position. Yet an invisible, impenetrable wall seemed to block his every move. Every opportunity he chased inevitably collapsed. Every physical effort ended in financial loss. Eventually, the cold, lonely nights inside that stationary taxi became his only known reality. But what ultimately changed his life was not a sudden shift in the outer economy. What changed was something vastly more profound. It was what the great spiritual teacher Emmet Fox described as the only real change that exists in the human experience, the complete and absolute transformation of the inner consciousness. Bernardo did not stumble upon a sudden investor. He did not win a lottery or receive an inheritance. Instead, he discovered a spiritual truth that reorganized his entire universe from the inside out. Today, Bernardo Salinas is the sole owner of a fleet of 652 freight trucks operating across 6 states. And the seed of that immense, multi-million-dollar enterprise was not a bank loan. It was a prayer, but not just any prayer. It was a scientific prayer drawn directly from the teachings of Emmet Fox, which altered the very fabric of his consciousness forever. This spiritual law implies something tremendously powerful. If the outer world can change, and we know it changes all the time, then the inner world can be deliberately and systematically transformed to dictate that change. Trying to change your financial situation without changing your consciousness is exactly like trying to comb the hair of the reflection in the mirror instead of combing your own hair. It is a physical impossibility. When Bernardo Salinas was shivering in his taxi, he didn't know the name Emmet Fox, but he intimately knew the profound exhaustion of unanswered prayer. He knew exactly what it meant to beg God in utter desperation, to plead for a breakthrough, only to feel that the heavens were made of brass and his words were bouncing off the ceiling. It is a feeling many of you watching this know too well, the prayer of last resort, born of sheer panic when no physical options remain. Scientific prayer, therefore, is never about begging. It is not making a desperate bargain with the Creator. It is the conscious, deliberate recognition of a spiritual truth that already exists. It is boldly declaring what is true in the divine mind, even if the physical plane of your life does not yet reflect it. One night, parked under a flickering streetlight on a side road in Monterey, Bernardo found an old, yellowed book with a broken spine that a passenger had left behind on the front seat. It was a Spanish translation of Emmet Fox's teachings on the power of scientific prayer and divine consciousness. That night, Bernardo did not sleep a wink. By the dim light of the street lamp, he read phrases he had never heard spoken in any traditional church or business seminar. He read, "Change your thought, and you change your life." And then he read a statement that stopped him cold, forcing him to put the book down. Bernardo stared out the foggy taxi window for a long time. In a sudden flash of spiritual clarity, the illusion shattered. He realized the brutal truth. He had not been praying to receive abundance at all. He had been praying from the deeply ingrained consciousness of a man who felt fundamentally unworthy of abundance. He was a man who, at his core, did not actually believe prosperity was a real possibility for someone with his background and his failures. That night, alone in the dark, Bernardo stopped begging for a visible, physical miracle. Following the instructions laid out in that battered book, he began to build the consciousness of a prosperous man within his own mind. He did not do this as an idle daydream or a wishful fantasy. He did it as an establishment of a spiritual fact, a truth that already existed in the divine plane, just waiting to be claimed by an awakened mind. Scientific prayer does nothing but wash the window. You do not ever have to persuade the light to shine. You merely remove the mental obstacles, the deep-seated fears of lack, preventing your divine inheritance from flooding into your visible experience. Bernardo passed that entire first night doing exactly that, wiping the mud from his inner window with every deliberate, conscious thought. The morning after that profound internal shift, Bernardo Salinas did not wake up in a luxury hotel suite. He woke up in the exact same rusted taxi, parked on the exact same desolate street, chilled by the exact same biting dawn wind. If anyone had walked past him, they would have seen the exact same destitute man. Absolutely nothing in his external, visible world had changed. Yet, when Bernardo described that specific sunrise years later to his employees, He used words they never forgot. I woke up as an entirely different person. I cannot explain it any other way. It was the same physical body, the same taxi, but the consciousness animating it had shifted from the very foundations. Fox painstakingly explained to his students that this was not a miracle, in the popular, superstitious sense of the word. A miracle implies that God occasionally breaks his own rules to grant a special favor. No, Fox taught that this was simply spiritual law operating with perfect, mathematical consistency. When the inner consciousness genuinely and completely changes, the outer world has absolutely no choice but to reorganize itself to reflect that new consciousness. It is as predictable as the law of gravity, but it operates on the unseen plane of mind and spirit. What makes these transformations appear miraculous to the untrained eye is solely the breathtaking speed with which the physical world shifts when the inner transformation is total, not superficial. 3 weeks after that night in the taxi, Bernardo received a phone call from a distant acquaintance. The man needed someone trustworthy to transport a small, urgent load to the city of Saltillo. It was a minuscule job, almost insignificant in terms of immediate financial gain. 3 weeks earlier, the old Bernardo would have looked at this offer with bitterness, seeing it as just another miserable taxi fare that wouldn't even cover his debts. But Bernardo viewed this opportunity through the lens of a completely transformed consciousness. He did not see a meager taxi job. He saw the very first visible manifestation of his new internal state. He recognized it as the divine mind opening the first tiny channel of a flow that had no physical limit. Emmet Fox taught that manifestation almost always begins exactly like this, with something small, something the limited, arrogant human ego would easily discard, but which an awakened spiritual consciousness recognizes as the pulling of a thread that unravels infinite good. Bernardo accepted that small job with a profound, almost disproportionate gratitude, and it was on that specific, seemingly insignificant trip to Saltillo that he met a businessman who desperately needed a reliable partner for regular, lucrative freight routes. Bernardo did not orchestrate this meeting through frantic networking. His new consciousness naturally magnetized the exact connections that corresponded to his internal state of recognized abundance. Emmet Fox called this the law of spiritual correspondence. Your inner state literally dictates who you meet, what doors unexpectedly open, and what conversations take place. If you are facing an immovable obstacle, a mountain of debt, or a condition of agonizing lack, you must understand that your problem is not financial. It is entirely spiritual. No external solution can ever sustain itself as long as your inner consciousness continues to broadcast on the frequency of lack and fear.